This is a union town, a union town. All down the line, this is a union town, all down the line.
January 2011, Scott Walker, the newly elected Republican governor of Wisconsin, announced his plan to repeal the rights of public sector unions in Wisconsin. These unions, representing teachers, social workers, bus drivers, snowplow drivers, and other state and local government employees, had defended workers' rights in Wisconsin for decades. Wisconsin was the first state to allow state and local government employees to unionize and organize with laws that were passed in 1959 and 1962. Walker, who had been elected as part of the Tea Party wave of 2010, made union busting a top priority of his administration. His allies in the state assembly worked to pass Act 10, which would undermine public sector unions' ability to collect dues from members, as well as deprive them of a lot of opportunities to bargain over different issues, and essentially take away their rights. However, unions in Wisconsin were not going down without a fight. Thousands mobilized on the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin. Democratic state senators fled the state to prevent a quorum, which delayed the Republicans being able to pass this law. The pro-union protest turned into an occupation. Union activists slept in the state capitol, camped out in the freezing cold on the lawn of the state capitol.
The future of the rights of working people in this country will be decided on the streets of Madison, Wisconsin. You're making history here, and the whole world is watching.
It would inspire the Occupy Wall Street protests later that year. However, after several legal fights, Walker was able to pass the bill into law. Wisconsin, once a blue beacon of union strength in the Midwest with a storied progressive past, now saw declining union density and was at risk of becoming what activists call Mississippi. The state capital of Madison, Wisconsin, is a college town nestled between Lake Mendota and Lake Monona in the south central part of the state. It was the center of large anti-war protests during the Vietnam War era and is one of only 2 cities in the United States with a monument to the volunteers of the Abraham Lincoln Brigades. Madison, Wisconsin is also home to the Madison Labor Temple, where much of the union activism in Madison is centered. Local unions hold meetings, trainings, they launch rallies and canvases out of the temple. It is also used by the local working class community for events as varied as birthday parties to quinceaneras, weddings, all sorts of great things happen there. Hi, I'm Matt Machowski. You're watching Union Halls of America, and we spoke with several of the labor leaders who run and use the Madison Labor Temple.
I'm Dave Poklinkuski, former president of IBEW Local 2304, and I'm the vice president of the Madison Labor Temple Association.
I'm Jim Cavanaugh. I was president of the South Central Federation of Labor here in Madison from 1986 to 2012. and I'm retired now.
High five.
I'm still somewhat active in the Federation of Labor, but otherwise, I'm not now, nor have I ever been a member of the Labor Temple Association, just a tenant. And even though most people assume that a labor temple is owned by the Central Labor Council, this one never was. And over the years, we used to fend a lot of phone calls from people interested in renting or whatever, and I was always happy to, or complaining, and I was always happy to tell them that we are just a tenant.
So right now, we're dealing with Act 10 that wiped out the public sector. We're dealing with right to work. So some of your lower wage, worker organized, unions have suffered from the right to work. And then we also had COVID. If you're going to have office space and COVID happens and now everybody's working from home, who needs office space? We also went a whole year without meetings in here. So if you're thinking that that's part of your income and you are barely financially existing, as we do, that's a big hit. But we survived all of that. So the building is full, but we've had to change. The other thing that's really significant is the nature of the labor movement has evolved. In part, that goes also back to Scott Walker, where he pushed the building trades out of the tech colleges and the apprenticeship programs that were run through the tech colleges. So all of the building trades, literally all of them, have had to build their own facilities or rent their own facilities, training facilities. And if you own a Taj Mahal training facility, you might as well have your offices there. You're not going to have them here. So this building used to have almost all the trades in it. It does not anymore. The carpenters have some space here and the bricklayers do, but other than that, the construction trades are gone. So as an organization, as the board of the Labor Temple Association, which has 10 members and the building is owned by 15 unions, we've really had to evolve our mission. So we reached out into the community and made this facility available for the community to use in addition to the labor movement. And that's, that usage, it's exploded, and it really shows you the evolving nature of the working class in our community. Some folks were here, they're looking to rent the hall for next year for a quinceanera. So what we now have here is an online, there you go. You can access our Labor Temple online. So for yourself, you can do some research by just looking at this. So you can book a meeting room and take a look and see what we have available for reservations for meeting rooms, parties on weekends. And I could scroll through this, but we're booked solid through the end of the year. And now we're booking into next year for weddings and quinceañeras, primarily quinceañeras.
So it's not just a place for unions to have business meetings, it's a community center.
Jim just mentioned that. Yeah. Well, the history of the Labor Temple Association is we were providing a meeting space for local unions and the community to organize. And over 100 years ago, the Labor Temple Association started buying its own building for that purpose. It owned a couple buildings downtown. It eventually moved out here, and this was out here. This was all a big field back in 1958. Yeah, think about it. And actually all of this property around here was owned by the association. But anyhow, this building was built in 1958, and it's the purpose and of the Labor Temple tends to evolve based upon the status of the organizing that's going on in the community and the status of the labor movement. We have a number of local unions that have their offices in the Labor Temple. So this is one of them, IBW Local 2304. Well, it represents workers at Madison Gas and Electric, the full-time union reps at Madison Teachers Incorporated, and the staff collective at WORT-FM radio station, your listener-sponsored community radio here in Madison. So I think that 2304 actually represents a lot of key elements of our society here, and that's a good thing. It's a small local with a big agenda.
This is a great banner they have.
Yep, yeah, that's all part of a contract campaign. And they just negotiated probably one of the better labor agreements ever negotiated here last year. And I used to be our president and business manager for 33 years, so this is the first contract they negotiated without me chairing the bargaining.
And they did better.
And it turns out to be like the best contract they've ever had, which is all good. That's a good thing.
That's what you set them up for.
There you go.
I like that metal
Yeah.
graphic.
Yeah. Well, that came from the 6th district. They like us. This came from the teachers, the kids. Madison teachers in the summer has they have summer classes for kids, and they bring them down here. And our local now, they work with our local doing a tour of the building and talk about what's a union.
What's with the church picture?
So this is a photograph from when we brought Reverend Barber into town, and he did a program upstairs here, 201 ABC in the big hall, and we also did something at this church downtown.
It seems like you have some historic newspapers here.
Yeah, those are from actually the Madison Gas and Electric's newspapers that we've chronicled over the years. All kinds of things, and our own local newsletters that we've chronicled over the years. The new union leadership here is younger and knows how to use the computer, so a lot of the paper stuff is being changed.
Hopefully they're doing a good job of
I think they are.
Documenting the history, though, and
Well-
preserving it.
I'm supposed to be writing the history of our local. That's one of the things they want. Let's go this up. We have the Madison Labor Temple Association has one of the older liquor licenses in the county. So it's extremely valuable in that respect. And this is the Madison Labor Temple Lounge. It's obviously not open. From a financial standpoint, we really just open it now whenever there's a big meeting or somebody, has something going on, because it got wiped out during COVID, and it's just a complication of things. I mean, if we want to have this bar be successful, we really need a young bartender to open it up around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when all of the construction trades guys come back from work at 2:30. A lot of them work 6 to 2:30. So this lot is full of, park and ride construction guys, mostly guys. And our bartender that we currently have can't start working until 4. Well, everybody's gone. So that kind of mediates against a successful business model right now for the bar. But, so we don't open it all the time right now.
I mean, it has like a very wood grain kind of feel to it.
It's
Wood grain, Midwestern, cash only bar. And of course,
well, let me give you some more.
some spotted cow.
Gotta have the spotted cow. There we go, a little more light. Not much. is we have this very valuable liquor license here, and I kind of like this old bar. I like the U shape where you know you literally everybody can talk to everybody. Anyhow, that's
Yeah, and back when, before COVID and before other issues, this bar served a very good purpose in the Madison labor movement. You know, after the monthly South Central Federation of Labor meetings, where all the different unions would be represented, many people would come to the bar, and it just created a inter-union solidarity that you don't necessarily see in some places. I mean, it was, I can remember when I was much younger, that many of us younger folks at that time, we'd close this bar at 2 a.m. after a Fed meeting, a monthly Fed meeting. And it was also, you know, a place where sometimes you'd meet somebody to iron out an issue, and it served a purpose.
same here. I mean, when I first started working at Madison Gas and Electric and came to my first union meetings down here in 1978, you would drink in the bar and you would talk about the future of the union and who needs to and what is to be done. You know, you would have long, hard conversations with folks over beers or sitting outside, leaning up against the building. You know, just solving the world's problems. It was it has had that very valuable role in our history. Well, let's leave the bar and we go down the hall.
The index.
Yeah.
So it gives you an idea of the way the tenants have changed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's.
It's to have a religious organization here now, a church group.
And I don't know if this is true or whether it's just legend, but they claim when this building was built, it was built on weekends by building trades people who were paid with beer.
This is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line.
So, all kinds of small offices, so for example, this is on this side of the hall. This is what they're small little offices like this. This is the Labor Temple office. We also share it with, there's an unemployment clinic that attorneys and students in the law school, it's a service that we provide.
Yeah, and that's been going on since the early 80s, I think.
I think Marilyn Townsend was involved in getting that started back in the day.
And Lila Pine.
Who's that?
Lila Pine?
Oh, Violet, that's right, Alpha. I think that's right, yeah. Room 109, where you guys are meeting, you've been in there. This is typically where our local union will meet. Very handy size, you could put 40 people in here comfortably, so it works really well for our local union. On the other side here, and this is also good for parties if you're in that room, is our kitchen. We have Wolf and Sub-Zero appliances in here, courtesy of Smart Local 565.
Who makes them?
Who makes them here, in Madison, Middleton area. So, yeah.
Union-made kitchen appliances.
Some of the best in the world, actually. Wolf and Sub-Zero. Yeah. So we have them here. Basically donated. So that's a nice thing to have. Worker Justice Wisconsin has all of the offices down this way.
Which is basically a worker center, dealing basically exclusively with non-union workers who have problems on the job and other services and initiatives.
And they've really been growing
they've been growing, they're very successful.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say that I was a founder of both that organization and its two predecessor
Yeah,
organizations.
which all became one, yeah.
And I think probably its existence has helped with the community outreach for the renting of the hall upstairs and stuff,
Oh, without a doubt.
just because,
And vice versa.
yeah.
This painting caught my eye. Are you able to?
Yeah, there's
say
a little
anything?
bit of a history on that. During the Wisconsin uprising, well, there's a little history here. This guy's an electrician, an IBEW electrician in Michigan, and he had his portrait painted here by this person. And it was basically, he came to our protests here, and as you can see, it says Governor Walker equals rat. Yeah, anyhow.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land.
A lot of art was donated, and this is something that Jim can tell you more about than me, although I was certainly here for all of this. This is a mural that Jim was very much involved in organizing via the South Central Federation of Labor. We have brochures here that tell you what this all is, and you can basically take a look and see who and what all of this is about. But it's a history of the, here you go, labor movement in the Madison area.
Yeah, keep that.
You want?
The history of how this came together, it was late 90s, early 2000s, and a guy by the name of Marcus Nickel called me up one day, and he worked at some kind of stone cutter operation. Maybe it was engraving gravestones or whatever. And he was an artist, and he said that going around Madison, he noticed there was a lot of murals, largely in buildings, but also on buildings, and there was no labor mural. And so I got together, talked to him, and he made a lot of sense. And so I went to the Labor Temple board with him to see if they'd be interested in having a mural in the building. And I was a little skeptical about what their response would be. And Marcus had some pictures of a mural he'd done in a nightclub up in Wausau, Wisconsin. And the debate consisted of this. One guy says, "We should have done this a long time ago." And bingo, we were off and running. The brochure gives an idea of where the funding came from, mainly donations from unions, some nonprofits, the Wisconsin Humanities Committee, and one of the local Madison Arts Commission. And then we also sold kind of memorials and other particular unions that contributed. In each one of these cinder blocks we sold for $250 to put towards the cost. Unfortunately, well, we went through a whole process of surveys to find out what should be in the mural, and had some public programming and everything. And unfortunately, Marcus, the main inspiration and artist, he drew everything and started to paint, and he got sick, and they couldn't diagnose what it was. He got to the point where he couldn't finish it. So we brought in another artist, muralist, Sharon Guilfoy, who actually finished it with some volunteer union people who would do the paint by numbers kind of thing. So it was a major project, and when Davis talked about all the developers interested in developing this property, so far, one of the conditions is that they somehow reassemble this in the new labor temple that they would build as a condition of buying the property and stuff. But yeah, it takes the labor history up to 2006 of Madison's labor movement. But we've got room here if they want to bring it up to date.
There's certainly a lot of history since 2006 in Madison.
Yeah, not all good.
Yeah. Yeah, Sharon, who ultimately completed it, does a lot of murals in the Madison area, particularly on the east side, your east side.
Yeah, she did that one big one on what used to be the old Willie Street Co-op mall. It's now the,
Yeah. Social justice.
Social
Center.
Justice Center.
So here's our mural, and South Central Federation of Labor down that way.
Welcome to the South Central Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. We are a labor council that consists of about 90 to 100 unions in the area, both public sector and private sector, and we fight for social and economic justice in our communities with our allies and the union members.
Awesome.
So, and we do represent, those locals, by the way, represent tens of thousands of workers and their families and their allies and friends in the community throughout the region. So, welcome. Here's our office. We have, well, let's see, what are we all working on in the labor movement moving forward? As you can tell, this is from the protests that was given to us as a gift. So what does the Labor Council do and what are we working on? So I think what we're going to be talking about is the resurgence of labor. So what we have is organizing. You're hearing about a lot of organizing going on. This office alone in the last few years, especially since COVID, we have received about 60 organizing leads, 60. Usually you get 1 or 2 at most in a year. Out of those, 20 of them right now are actives. Many of them were successful. We've got 20 active ones right now, at least 20. So, and they're from all walks of life. These are workers that are in various sectors that want to organize, both private and public sector. Industrial workers, service sector workers, tech workers, hotel workers, the list goes on and on. Trades, they all want to join unions, and for good reason, obviously. Another thing that we're kind of like the hub for that. So we encourage workers to contact our office, and we do various ways to do that. And then they contact us. We're kind of like the place that when workers want to join a union, they figure they'll contact us. And so then we sit down with them, we work with them for a while, we get them to understand what are the first steps to organize. So we do all of that, mapping out the workplace, mapping out the employer, how to have those one-to-one conversations at a level where you don't reveal that you're organizing, so the employer doesn't find out. All these things we do, and then when they're ready, we introduce them to some unions. Typically, we know which union is focusing on which sector for our area. So we've had little to no so-called jurisdictional disputes, because on the other side, we sit down with the unions to figure out where are they all going and what are they all doing when it comes to organizing, and then how do they support each other versus having those types of disputes. So we've been very successful in all of that, and I'm proud of the office as well as the unions as well as the workers. The other thing that you've heard of in the past, there's been the year of the strike a few years ago, and those continue to happen. And so our role in that, with these workers who could be going on strike or will be going on strike, our role with that is to assist them in many different ways. So one can be our salary support network, and this network has been set up with some of my predecessors, as well as some people who have been around and have experienced a lot of different types of actions that are needed through worker struggle. So this could be the organizing, the workers that are organizing that I mentioned. they can sit down with this group and say, hey, what have you done with your plan this way, that way, et cetera, with the union. And the unions appreciate this. They'll come in to sit down with us. But we all sit down when you're going through a difficult bargaining campaign, some sort of issue that's happening at the workplace, or if you're trying to get some sort of objective, and that includes using direct actions at times, or for some workers, it's going on strike. For every strike that you've heard about, there are probably 5 or 6 times for every one time that you've heard about where those workers are preparing to go on strike. They sit down with us, and then they tell us their plan. We kind of brainstorm other ideas, and then they figure out with us what is our role as a labor council fitting into that greater plan that they have. And that is not common, probably with every labor council, but we're doing that, and we're sharing those experiences with others as well. So our office recently was asked by the National AFL-CIO to have a discussion with other labor councils and state feds in terms of why we're not having so many jurisdictional disputes. What are we doing in terms of this type of solidarity support? So that's all been very helpful and successful. So that's another thing we do. And then we have the electoral politics on the spring election, and we expanded that from just Dane County. And everyone say, well, it's easy to win in Dane County. And that's not always the case. It wasn't always the case, believe it or not. We used to have a conservative county board back in the day. But labor got together to figure out how to make sure we have pro-worker, pro-union board. But we've expanded that to all the area, local area counties and the school boards and the city councils and the county boards. So now we have, this last year we had over 150 endorsements on the spring election. And that's really important in many levels, post Act 10, post right to work, post all the attacks, is that we have elect people that are union members, if we can, union household members, but at the very least pro-union and understand what that means and what it means in practice. So we've been successful in flipping some boards that had never been flipped before to make sure they're pro-worker, pro-union, and progressive. So our electoral program, we're kind of the hub for that. And you can carry that over into the fall elections when it becomes statewide and national elections as well.
With the new state Supreme Court, there's new state maps. How is that going to impact the November elections?
Well, I think this is really important. So when we're talking about Act 10, there's 3 routes. There's the state Supreme Court case that's right, that will get to the state Supreme Court. Hopefully, it started here in district court, and the next step at some point will be in front of the state Supreme Court, which will be probably next year. That could be reverse parts of Act 10 as well as some of the other things that, whether it be forced or coerced to work for less, which people sometimes call right to work. It's not a right, and so I don't call it that. And then also prevailing wage, which impacted the building trades. There were something called labor peace agreements, which impacted the back end for the service trades and the industrial trades. And then there was something called project labor agreements, which is also the building trades. All of those things were either outlawed or, in terms of right to work, it was actually implemented to attack workers and labor. So one of the things for Act 10 was the judicial route. But the other route, obviously, is to change things in the law, and that has to start with the legislature. And that means we kind of, I will say it's not the best of all, but we got rid of gerrymandering to a large degree. It's still not as good as we'd like at the maps, but they're much, much better, where now we have a chance to win back the state assembly this year. And then in 2 years, we have a really good chance to also win back the state senate and hold the governorship. So that's the other route when it comes to state assembly. We win back the state assembly, make inroads into the state senate. That's another route to reverse all those things that they threw upon us here in the state of Wisconsin. And so that's why this is critical, to make sure that we get out there and we support these pro-union, pro-worker, pro-union candidates who will who will support policies and support legislation that actually helps the working class as opposed to attacking it. And so that's another thing that is important, and we're letting people know what those issues are and why it's important, especially now, this election, where we can flip the state assembly. And then in 2 years, we'll have to get the rest done. And frankly, this spring, I'll just continue. This spring is going to be really important for the state Supreme Court, because there will be someone retiring that supports workers and unions, and now we have to make sure we have that one seat majority to ensure that they make the right decisions when it comes to things like reversing Act 10.
Awesome.
So all of that too we're involved with. We also are kind of involved with community issues and all the social justice issues. So here you can kind of see, if you take a peek here. This I put in my office because this dates back to obviously when they went after different groups, and if you see, they went after unionists as well, and I think that's compelling in history, but also has something to do with today, with what's going on. And then those are some of, we also, I should say, these are Union Labor News that date back to I think the early 1900s. I have one on my desk that's actually from during World War II that I wanted to get an article on. Our Union Labor News, we still have it, and it's still very successful. And we have workers that write the stories about their stories oftentimes, but we also put in national and state stories and get allies like the NAACP and others to come in and write stuff. The workers know that when they have a struggle, they have a lot more support than they realize. Same with some of the clergy and so forth. And then this kind of when I do my meetings virtually, I sit in that chair because I kind of like the theme here of what labor stands for. So
awesome.
And here's a few books I'll just say. People like to pigeonhole us, right? That we just have one interest. Unions only care about, like narrow us to labor issues. But I like to put this in here because I want people to know I have a lot of other interests: wildlife, environmental, indigenous culture, and I think we all wear a dozen hats as workers and as leaders and as community members. And so I like to throw that in there just so when something is being done with an interview or whatever, I can let the press know that workers care about a lot of other issues as well.
Awesome.
Well, I'm wearing an AFGE shirt today because I've been invited to attend one of their workshops, and so that's why I'm wearing that. And I probably have, just so you know, 100 t-shirts, one for each union. And most of those I received during the protests, and then after, when Act 10 was implemented. And that's, I started being in a union 30 years ago in AFSCME, and it was Local 705, and it was a psychiatric facility, a lot of nursing, and I was the lone security person. I could wear whatever I wanted back then too, so I wore comfortable. I remember I was in a struggle before that, and it was at a nonprofit, and I'll just tell you briefly about that struggle. The nonprofit CEO, and we didn't know what unions were, the nonprofit CEO had hired her brother under a false name, and he was what we called the workers, an equal opportunity bigot. And when a worker, usually a woman or a person of color, complained about his behavior, and I won't say what he said, it was disgusting, they didn't know that they were going to his sister, the director, and then she would find ways to terminate them. And I would tell those workers, hey, he's telling me stuff, I've got, I got your back. And most of the time workers were like, just like me, we were like, oh, what's the point? We'll just go on to another crappy job. And so finally one worker said, I'm gonna stand up. And what they did was they eliminated the entire department to get rid of me. And then they hired a couple people back within that department. And we were all working poor. And so the woman I was dating at the time said, Kevin, you can get a government job. And I said, what's a government job? Because most of us didn't know. We just thought, okay, maybe a firefighter is a cop, but we didn't know. She goes, well, there's this part-time weekend night shift only, 16 hours a week, no benefits. That's an intro position. And you should apply for that because it paid $15 at the time. And I was like, wow, that's twice as much as what I was getting. So I finally thought I made it. And my first day of work there, the union president came up to me. It was a rank and file nurse, and she says, Kevin, you're in the union now. And I said the same thing. I asked, what's a union? And she goes, well, you like to fight. Because what had happened in that earlier struggle was that it got in the news because we won the case. I say it was me. It was only me fighting in the case, but no lawyer would pick it up. And I did all the work until finally a year later a lawyer picked it up, and then we won the case. The director who had hired her brother under a false name, who was a bigot, she was forced to resign and he was fired. And that's what I wanted, but the lawyer that had taken on the case for free had said they weren't going to guarantee that, but that's what I wanted, and that's what the workers wanted. Anyway, so back to my first day of work with the union, she goes, well, we read about you like to fight. And I said, yep, and I fight alone, because that's what I was used to as a working class poor person. And she goes, well, now we fight together. And I looked at her in a really confused way, like I was like doubtful, like, so you're telling me you have my back, I've got yours? And she goes, yeah. I go, all right, I'm in. 18 years later, 2 years later, a year later, they wanted me to run for president of the local. I had a lot of time on my hand as a part-timer, and I was working other jobs, but still, they knew I could do it. And then 18 years after my county job, they asked me to run for this position, and that's when they came up to me and said, we had plans for you. And I'm gonna just say it, I said, well, that's good, because I didn't. I was, you're working class, I was a little lost. And so I think my story is similar to a lot of workers' stories that didn't have that union background. We didn't know what our rights were. We didn't know that we could fight together. We either didn't fight or we fought alone. And the union taught us that when we fight together, we're stronger together. And we have to be strategic, we have to evolve, we have to change, but we have to be true to our principles, which is what I think the motto with the Labor Council and so many unions when fighting for social justice and economic justice. And so that's my short story with labor, and I'm proud to represent all the workers and fight alongside them.
AFL-CIO has an office here. We have some donated artwork that I should point out from Frank Emspak, Frank and Dolores Emspak. Frank just passed away here a few weeks ago, and Frank did, he's just has a great history and role in the labor movement and the anti-war movement, and he's was cleaning house at home. And he donated some of this stuff here.
Frank's father had been the Secretary-Treasurer of UE back in the day when it was hounded by HUAC. And so he's got familial history as well as his own credentials.
Here we have room 201. C, D, and A. We could put about 400 people in this hall, and we can break it into 3 rooms. There we go. Okay. And here's it's a big hall. You can put maybe 200, 250 people in tables. This hall gets rented out every weekend, usually quinceañeras, sometimes weddings. I would say today, 90% of the people that are renting this hall are Hispanic, most of them Mexican, many of them undocumented. Another 5% are African and African Americans that rent the hall. So that's, the changing nature of our community and the working class here in Madison.
And this is another partition that goes across, so there's actually 3 different separate meeting rooms if you want them that way.
And I will say that I mean, this looks pretty barren, but if you come in here on Saturday, you're not going to recognize the place. Well, the other thing that we did as a board, you know, Jim was talking about the labor mural history, but the other thing that we want to do is, you know, let's put forward some documents and just, you know, have some kind of labor history items for people to see. So, for example, here, this is, well, take a look at that first sentence on there. Just read that first sentence. It's the first meeting to organize a union at Madison Gas and Electric. So, you know, we kind of fill these display cases with documents like that. And additionally, people, you know, have donated artwork to us, some artwork that was taken during the uprising. And these
charity event with,
these are all the carpenters here. The carpenters are probably the largest per capita owner of the Labor Temple Association, followed by IBEW 159, that's the electricians local, and then Smart Local 565. Those are your three biggest, if you will, owners of the building of the 15 that own it. And we got some more stuff.
I love this this picture of the dancing couple.
Yeah. Well, here's something that you want to do for background. You want to get this. I was looking for that in my thing here, but this is, somebody wrote an article back in the day in the South Central Federation of Labor newspaper, Union Labor News, and that gives you a little bit of the history. And like it says, we've had 4 labor temples since 1893.
Gotta have you talk about the uprising.
You know, moments in history like that rarely come along. And when they do, you gotta push it for all it's worth.
This budget bill has got to go. This budget bill has got to go.
And we didn't do that there. I think maybe the best, Tom Morello put it best. He came back and he was doing like a get out the vote thing, and he was at the Barrymore Theater, and he's on the stage, and he said, you know, because he was here for the uprising and he performed there, and that's some great video. But he said, you know, people, next time you've got students and anarchists and socialists and cops and workers sleeping on the floor at the state capitol together, united, aim a little bit higher. To the extent that there was leadership of that, it didn't know what to do. And it just fell back on, let's vote for a Democrat and hopefully this is gonna be better. Quoting Jerry Tucker, I think he's quoting Gertrude Stein, there was no there to go back to. So we had, I think, a lot of the leadership, to the extent that we had that going on, was wanting to get back to where things were. There was no, that's not there anymore, that's gone. You know, the other side has decided that's gone. And so, you know, you have to move that whole thing forward, and that kind of thinking wasn't going on. The other thing I would say is this was an attack on public sector workers first and foremost. Everybody else was going to be next. But in the private sector, we've already been through this. You know, we had the 1980s, the concession bargaining, the union busting. And one of the lessons that we learned in the private sector, and that's primarily where I was involved in organizing, the lesson that we learned is if the employer's going to kill you, then you got to be prepared to kill them. I mean, that's a hard thing to say, but that's the way it is. And so here you had Scott Walker and the Republicans and the Koch brothers and the billionaire right wing decided to kill the unions, kill the public sector unions, and people weren't ready for that. They just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, public sector unions in particular have become so reliant on the legislative solutions and political action that in many cases they've kind of lost touch with the idea of union struggle. Struggle was you went door to door during and elected your favorite candidate. We did, the South Central Federation of Labor did had its regular meeting about 1 week into the uprising, and we did pass a motion to support the general strike. We couldn't call a general strike because we don't have collective bargaining. But I believe it passed by, I heard one vote against it. And I'm pretty sure I know who that was, and it was a public sector staffer. And the next day, the National AFL-CIO had a shit fit. I had 3 or 4 phone calls from him. You can't do that, you can't do that, because there's triple damage, and they can do it all the way up to the state fed and the national. And I said, all we said was we support the concept. I said, we're not calling for a general strike. We don't have that authority.
All right, and we actually did a really good job. We put together basically an education piece, an organizing an education piece, like what is a general strike? And if you're going to do it, how would you do it? And so, Jim created a committee. I was on that committee, and we worked with Peter Ratcliffe out of McAllister, and we worked with some folks from Labor Notes, and we put together this little comprehensive package on what's a general strike and what would that look like? How do you do that? The union and political infrastructure wasn't there. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the history of public sector in Wisconsin, it goes all the way back to the Hortonville teachers strike in 1971, I think that was.
73.
Okay. And in response to that, the legislature here basically created this mediation, arbitration, legal process. Everything is handled by staffers. So if you have a grievance, if you're going to negotiate a contract, these staffers are going to sit down and they're going to talk to the municipal employers, lawyers, or from the state standpoint, it was Marty and them, they would just do deal making and would not engage in or mobilize their members. And so you had this whole legal, structural demobilization of the public sector labor movement. And that's what happened. Now, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously, that turned out to be a bad thing. But on the other hand, they had good contracts, and if you had a problem, you could file a grievance, and 2 or 3 years from now, it'll get resolved, and your wages weren't the best, but you had great public sector benefits. So what's wrong with that system? Well, we found out what was wrong with that system. But
Yeah, when shortly after I became president of the South Central Fed in the late 80s, I had lunch with the longtime executive director of the teachers union in Madison, John Matthews. And he said, the worst thing that's ever happened to the labor movement, public sector labor movement in Wisconsin, was the passage of that Mead-Our bill. He said, but God help us if they repeal it. And damn, they repealed it in 2011.
yeah.
You respect my rights, uphold them. Law enforcement is here to protect us.
Union power! Union power!
The Madison Labor Temple, like the whole labor movement in Wisconsin, is at a crossroads. As Act 10 and other anti-union laws have pummeled labor in Wisconsin, so has the Labor Temple felt the impact. The Labor Temple's board is now taking bids from developers for the property, with the hope of being able to preserve a labor presence on the site. And so far, one of the conditions for any new development has included the preservation of the mural in the stairwell in any sort of new Labor Temple building. The Madison Labor Temple is continuing to accept room reservations for everything from union meetings and trainings to weddings and quinceaneras. You can reserve a spot by going to the Madison Labor Temple website at www.madisonlabortemple.com. In my job as an organizer with the American Federation of Government Employees, we've had several events at the Labor Temple, from teach-ins about veterans health care and VA workers to trainings for our members, get out the vote canvases, and of course, after all of these events, you can always get a celebratory beer at the lounge afterwards. There's no way around it. Labor is down, but not out in Wisconsin. And much of the Madison area fight back to rebuild labor in Wisconsin launches out of the Labor Temple. New union organizing is increasing. And in Madison, much of it uses the Labor Temple to meet, plan, and train at. The Labor Temple is also used as a launch site for Get Out the Vote campaigns. In 2024, there were huge GOTV, Get Out the Vote efforts launched out of the Labor Temple. And while it wasn't enough in the 2024 presidential race, where anti-union scab Trump conned enough people to win Wisconsin, the Get Out the Vote efforts of labor helped to keep pro-union Senator Tammy Baldwin in the U.S. Senate. And earlier, those Get Out the Vote efforts helped flip control of the state Supreme Court. This was huge because this last December, a judge ruled that most of Scott Walker's anti-union Act 10 law was unconstitutional. Now, a pro-union state Supreme Court is set to hear the appeal to that ruling. This is huge. This has the potential to reset what organizing in the Badger State can look like. And the state Supreme Court also redrew state district maps. The Republican majority under Scott Walker had gerrymandered the maps so that even though the majority of the state would vote for Democratic state reps, they would be packed in to districts in a way to suppress their representation, so that with the new maps, it's fair. It's going to reflect people's vote. That helps break the GOP's stranglehold on the state legislature in Wisconsin. Of course, labor movement can't and won't rest on its laurels. There's another state Supreme Court race in 2025. You can connect with the Wisconsin AFL-CIO or any of the central labor councils, the local AFL-CIO affiliates, to find out ways to get involved in getting out the vote with that race. This race will be important to preserve the pro-union majority of the state Supreme Court. And of course, many unions across Wisconsin will be mobilizing to get out the vote for this race, and many of them will meet at the Madison Labor Temple to do so. While labor unions are not yet back to their pre-Scott Walker strength, and the election of Trump will prove to have its own challenges, unions in Wisconsin have won some really important victories and are not giving up. Wisconsin's unions will continue to organize and fight for workers' rights, and they will continue to use the Madison Labor Temple. What form that organizing And what form the Madison Labor Temple take in the future depends on all of our efforts. Thanks for watching. This is Matt Machowski with Union Halls of America.
Good memories are forever, said the dog on the tombstone. If you're living underneath the bridge, man, all roads lead to home. I got a hidden flask, I'm paid in cash, got a cross above my bed. You know, I hitchhiked from Chicago, and a man walked up and said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if you come to strip our rights away, we'll give you hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line. Today the policeman's a union man, brother firefighter's my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line.